All right, we're live. How's everybody doing today? See a lot of familiar places. We got Thomas, Sharon, Dave, Ethan, Prometheus, Christian, Dennis. So I threw a little poll up in the chat asking, is this your first ChessGoals live class? We got 13 votes so far. It looks like almost 80% of you, it's not your first class. So welcome back to those of you that have been here before. 21% of you are new. Welcome for your first time. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through up to 6 different games and talk about middle game planning. And these are different games than what we've looked at in the past. So if you watched the other middle game planning class that we had a couple of months ago, this is completely fresh content that I prepared for today. And I did go over these same games at my local chess club. So I see at least one person in the chat from Rochester. Dennis, you've seen these games before and know all the answers. So let's just first start by saying, everyone say where you're from in the chat. It's always nice to see where people come from. Oh, Justin's here too. Welcome, Justin. He knows the answers. Justin, you knew a lot of the answers the first time around, though. You already knew the answers. I'm here to master the Caro. Nice. Hey, Larry, welcome. Rochester, Orinoco. Oh, Poland. Welcome. Turkey, first timer. Wisconsin. Matt Markland's here from Rochester. All right. North of Germany. Sworn to secrecy. Whoa, 2 people from Germany. Thomas and Christian, okay. We should do a stream in German. Then the problem is we need someone that knows German to do the stream. All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Looks like about 70% of you have been to a ChessGoals live stream. 28% have not. Let's jump into a very brief overview. All right. So this is kind of for those of you that are new, but I'll try to keep it short. My name is Matt. I'm a national master. I started chess when I was pretty young, 5 years old. I've been coaching since the age of 10, so almost 3 decades of coaching experience. I was a 3-time Minnesota high school champion or co-champion. That's sort of like when I was at my prime in chess. I now work in statistics. I love working with data and spreadsheets. A lot of my friends joke that I have spreadsheets to track everything. It's like a running joke. And I became a master, national master, USCF, at age 29. Around age 24 or 25, I made a big push towards making master, and I had about 70 points to go. So I had to go from 2130 to about 2200, but I was able to get it for my 30th birthday. All right, so what is ChessGoals? ChessGoals started almost 5 years ago now with a survey that had over 400 entries, and people said how much time they spend each week playing Blitz, playing Rapid, playing Classical, how much time they spend doing tactics, strategy, what resources they use, openings. We had a ton of data. So this kind of combined my love of data, chess, and teaching. All 3, were packaged together with this survey. The survey was the data part. And then what I was able to do was I took all that data, mapped it to how many rating points the players gained or lost in a 12-month time frame. And that was what built our original 6 study plans. So the study plans are based on what worked best for those players in the survey. Now, it's not a perfect statistical survey because it's just people can pick when they want to sign up. And a lot of it's based on just what they say. And I only kind of spot check the outliers. But I think it's pretty good. So these 6 study plan levels are now in our free ChessGoals Blueprint course. And there's a link in the description to our course page, chessgoals.com. And now we are over 3,500 students in our community. Over 3,500 usernames have signed up for our course website. And we have free courses too. 18 courses in total. I think 5 of them are free, 13 of them are paid courses. And support, we have people helping daily. I see some of the common helpers in our chat as well. Smithy Q is definitely a big one. Smithy Q is one of our active coaches, and he has a Smithy's Minis course for chess goals. And really the big goal is just to help you guys improve. We want to help as many people as possible and keep growing the Chess Goals brand. Now, this is a new slide. Some of you, if you're in our Discord server, have seen this. The co-owner of Chess Goals, his name is Jesse, has been working very hard on his trainer app. And it's still kind of in the early stages. But if you want to check it out, bookmark this site, and we'll talk about it at the end too. train.chessgoals.com. And there's some kind of cool things coming down the pipeline with this trainer app. And because it's still in such an early phase, people who get on board now can kind of help shape what we're going to do with the app going forward. So we're kind of looking for different feedback on that. All right, so here's our agenda. We got Memphis in the background. Introductions, done. Meet Matt and what is Chess Goals, done. And now let's jump into the interactive lesson. All right. So first game, we have Bobby Fischer playing the white pieces, Boris Spassky playing the black pieces. This is from the 1972 World Championship match. Spassky won game number 1. Game number 2, Bobby forfeited because the organizers did not meet his demands. That potentially, though, worked in Fischer's favor because according to Karpov, he said that Spassky was upset that Fischer forfeited a game. Then Fischer ended up winning games 3 and 5. There was a draw in game 4. So this is game number 6. The match is tied 2.5 apiece. What we're going to look at is Fischer's strategic planning. Okay, so we're going to see how to take small advantages and convert them into a win in this game. And it's kind of a classic example of using positional play first, creating some weaknesses in the opponent's camp, and then going for a tactical finish. All right, so we're going to walk through these first moves pretty quickly. This is an English opening, and it transposes into what's called a Queen's Gambit declined. And these moves are all pretty standard book theory. And when we get to move 17, that's where we reach the start of the middle game, or at least started the quiz questions about the middle game. Ethan remembers this game well, or the match, I guess. All right, so here's our first position. Now I want you to put in the chat. This is going to be an interactive lesson. Put in the chat, what is the name of this pawn structure? So put the name of this pawn structure in the chat. Focus on these 2 pawns. Yep, Thomas, first one to get it. Hanging pawns. These are called hanging pawns. So, with hanging pawns, the advantage of having hanging pawns is these pawns control 4 squares on the rank in front of them. So this 4th rank, black has a lot of control. They also give black more space because compare those pawns to these 2 pawns. They're back on the 2nd and 3rd rank for white, whereas the C and D pawns are the 4th rank for black. So it gives you more space having the hanging pawns. It also creates some attacking potential having that extra space. But those pawns can become potential weaknesses. So what white wants to do is white wants to get one of those pawns to push forward. Because when the pawns are separated, when you get one to move forward 1 rank, what happens is the squares in front of those pawns become easier to occupy. So you can blockade the pawns and then attack them, right? So picture this pawn up 1, the C pawn up 1. White can control these blue squares, put the rooks on D1 and C1, start to pressure the pawns. So going for the end game is a good strategy for white here. Going for the attack is a good strategy for black. Okay, so based on that, now let's look at the other imbalances in the position. Knight on B8, not a great piece. Knight on F3 is a little bit stronger. This bishop, fairly well placed because it does still access this diagonal and defends this pawn. This bishop, kind of similar, right? It still has an active diagonal, but it's not doing a lot outside of that. Rooks are also pretty similar. Queens are pretty similar. So the main imbalance here is the pawn structure. So now, next question for you guys. Put in the chat. What is the eval in this position? It's very important in chess to always have a mindset of what is the current eval of the position. And this can either be, you can think of it as a stockfish eval, or you can create your own system, or maybe you just say white is slightly better, white is much better, black is slightly better, it's equal. What you want to know is you want to know what the eval is at all times, because that helps you go down different paths and see, okay, what's the eval down this route? What's the current eval? What's the eval down that route? Let's compare the two routes. Um, Also, when you think about a position, you want to think about the risk for each side, right? So when your position is good, you want it to be a low risk position. When your position is bad, you want it to be a high risk position, especially for your opponent. You want to increase their chances of making mistakes, make the game sloppy. All right, so we got a couple answers. 0.6, 0.3, 0.347. It's a lot of sig figs. +2. So everyone is saying white's advantage. See who gets the closest. Dave, 0.04. Cosme, 0.1 for black. First person saying for black. Prometheus, 0.3 for black, 0.4 for white. Ethan. All right, the answer is 0.08 for white. Dave was extremely close. Okay, so essentially this is an equal position. We talked about the plans for each side. Now in this position, Spassky plays knight to d7, and I want you to put in the chat, what is the best move for white? What would you play in this position? So we want to make these hanging pawns weaknesses for black. UPS should be out of our neighborhood in a few minutes. What is the best move for white? Put your answers in the chat. B4, Chess Simple is saying. Trying to undermine these pawns. Another B4. Rook D1. B4. Hey Yogesh, welcome. E4. Knight to D4, says Tippy. Rook F to D1. Knight D4. Knight D4. Wow, good. Okay, we got some great answers here. Even the answers that aren't the top move have the right idea. So let's look at the pawn pushes first. Pawn to B4. Pawn to C4 by black. It's kind of the right idea in general, right? We got these pawns separated. Eval's around -0.2. So it's the right idea, but in this case, it's not the strongest move. E4 can be met by D takes E4. That's around -0.4. So little advantage for black. They pick up that pawn. Rook F to D1. Perfectly good move. And I would say it's almost as good as the top move in the position. This is still around equal, but Knight D7 was a slight inaccuracy. And the way to punish it is Knight to D4. So a couple people got it. Tippy, Patrick, both got it. Knight to D4. So the idea with Knight to D4 is you're targeting this bishop, and the bishop defends one of the potentially weak pawns. But you want to go a little bit deeper. I should also mention black cannot take the knight because of rook takes C8 check. So that pawn is pinned to the rook. But we want to go a little bit deeper here. The idea after taking the bishop is we have another move in mind next. Okay, so Queen F8 played. Now we want to play knight takes E6, F takes E6, and put your answer in the chat next. What do we play here? This is the important move. If you don't play this move, black is still kind of close to equal, but this is what gives white the advantage. And really, you should see this when you say knight to D4. Had this idea in mind. Jagajit is saying pawn to E4. Any other guesses? Bishop to B5. Oh, that's a cool idea. This pawn is pinned to the rook. What else do we think? Bishop g4. Attacking this pawn. Getting some good guesses. The top move is around a half a pawn advantage for white, half a point. Bishop g4 is about a quarter of a point. The second best move. The answer is pawn to e4. Gaga got it right. So what we're doing here is we're threatening e takes d5 and bishop to g4. The move Prometheus mentioned, bishop to g4, targeting the pawns, but we want to weaken these pawns. And one thing that I should show you, if we go back here, let's say queen f8 wasn't played, and we'll give black a random move. This pawn structure, after taking back with the queen and rook f to d1, is a large advantage for white. We're looking at 0.7 or higher for white. And the reason for that is because we still have the pawn weaknesses in black's camp, but black doesn't really have any compensation for those pawns. It's going to be very easy for white to simply play bishop f3, target these pawns, and black is stuck playing defense long term. Human against human, this is probably going to be a loss. I'd say about half the time at club level, and a draw close to the other half. Like, really, I don't see black winning this position very often. Okay, so in the game, pawn to e4, great move. The best reply is probably d takes e, but Spassky played pawn to d4. And now Fischer plays pawn to f4. And the idea is he wants to play pawn to e5, put these pawns on dark squares, and cement the weakness on e6. So just notice how Fischer is playing with the pawn structure, right? We had the hanging pawns, a little inaccuracy by Spassky by putting this knight on d7. And Fischer immediately says, all right, I'm going to take e6, play e4, and now this pawn is weak, and these pawns are separated. So Fischer is playing for the pawn weaknesses here. Nice positional play so far. Queen e7, pawn to e5. So we see that pawn locked on e6. Rook to b8, bishop to c4, hitting the pawn with the king behind it. King h8. And now this is a cool move. Queen to h3. The queen shifts all the way across the board. These are not easy moves to see, creating a double attack on the weak pawn. Prometheus says, I always thought hanging pawns are good. Now I'm scared to have a pair. Aren't we worried about the connected passer, says Thomas. Great question. So yeah, you want to be very careful with protected pass pawns. This is a protected pass pawn. But in this case, the pawn's having trouble advancing. And more important is the dynamic advantage for white, this attacking potential. We have the double attack here. And as we're going to see coming up, this idea of f5 with the rook behind it puts this king in some danger. And these black pieces are a little bit clumsy, stuck over on the queen side. Not very easy for them to get back into the action. They're not creating any threats currently. The knight f8 played, defending this pawn. And I think someone in our Rochester lecture that we did in person said, how about rook takes b2? I think that is a stronger move. Because I just mentioned those rooks not doing much. Rook takes b2 would be a way for black to fight dynamically, but it is still a very large advantage for white. We're looking at least +2 after bishop takes e6. Okay, so knight f8 played in the game. Now, this is a smooth move by Fischer. He plays pawn to b3. And one thing that I've noticed when going through some of these games in preparation for the middle game class, top players are really good at sneaking in these prophylactic moves. Fischer knows that rook takes b2 is an idea here. He also knows that he has a little bit of time, that he can take one move, shut that down, and then go for his plan. Chess Simple's asking, is there a general rule of thumb? How many minor pieces need to be on the board just by the hanging pawns? Great question. I don't know of a general rule. I would guess that the side with hanging pawns would prefer 3 or 4 minor pieces. And I think once you're down to 2, it's getting a little bit dicey having the hanging pawns. And that's just kind of my, off the top of my head, general thought. One set of minor pieces or 2, you probably don't want the hanging pawns. But great question. So now after b3, pawn to a5 played. Spassky's trying to chip away. And here Fischer plays pawn to f5. And the threat is pawn to f6 with the e-pawn and the rook behind it. Black takes, rook takes. Now what I want you guys to do in the chat, this is going to be a little bit of typing. Type out what the imbalances are and what you believe the eval is. Hey Lucas, welcome. Type out the imbalances and the eval. See what you guys think. And this is how you should be thinking about all your positions. You want to kind of have an idea of strengths and weaknesses in the position. That's what I call imbalances. And you always want to kind of have in your mind what is the current eval of the position. That'll help us find a plan. Those two things. Okay, we got space advantage. Yep, space advantage for white. Good bishop against bad knight. Christian's saying a 1.8 eval. Matt is saying what's in the cup? It's coffee, Matt. Made coffee. White is the better minor pieces and the open f-file. Safer king for white. Yep, that's right. Okay, good. You guys are on the right track. And the eval is around 2.9. So pretty big advantage for white. So now we want to use our space and the lack of king safety for black. That's how we're going to push for the advantage. Okay, black is saying connected passers. White has better minor pieces, more active rooks, better king safety. Yep, king safety, space, bishop, f-file from Dennis. Yeah, you guys are all on the right track. Jaga, same thing. Good, just simple. Good, good. Okay. So knight h7 played. Rook f to c1, doubling on the f-file, trying to sink that rook into f7 soon. The black king is unsafe because of the white pieces all surrounding it and the fact that this is gone, Matt. So like this bishop hitting g8, the king is trapped right now. And this can cause some tactical problems. And also picture like a rook coming into f7, maybe something happening on g7. So it's the potential for these white pieces to all attack the openings around the black king. Whereas this king, even though the f-pawn's gone, there's nothing that can get on this diagonal, and there's no black pieces even remotely threatening to attack him. And that's why earlier black probably should have considered that rook takes b2 move, or should have played it, because at least it's starting to try to look at the white king, right? Grab that pawn and fight for some dynamic play. Whereas right now, black is just sitting back playing defense, which is never a great idea. So queen d8 played, queen g3, rook e7, and now pawn to h4. What he's doing is he's shutting down that knight. Knight g5 was a potential idea for Spassky. Fischer saying, nope, you're not going to play that. Rook b7, e6. This is a hard move to play. It blocks the bishop, but it also cements that pawn all the way up on the 6th rank. And Fischer has another idea in mind. This queen can come to e5 soon. Rook to c7. Queen e5. Hitting that pawn. She's also tying down the rook to defend the c5 pawn. Queen e8. And now look at this move by Fischer. Spassky could play a4 on the next move. That's an idea for black. He goes a4 himself. It looks like he's, breaking all the rules. He made a backward pawn. He's putting all the pawns on light when his bishop is already on light squares. But this is why you have to always think about rules in terms of the current position. Every chess rule has exceptions. In this case, he knows that he's putting all these pawns on light to shut down black's play. This bishop can come back to d3 later and get on this diagonal. Queen d8, and Spassky's just shuffling. Notice how he can't do anything productive. Eric is asking, how do you see counterplay like that? Great question. So in these kind of positions, I like to always think about the risk and reward, right? So if we go back to when a4 was played. During the game, you don't know what the eval is here. Stockfish is saying +5. I probably wouldn't feel this as a full +5. Say it's a classical game. I might think I'm up like 2.5 or 3 here from the white side. I know I have full control of the position. When you have full control of the position and you have the advantage, not only are you looking for ways to increase the advantage and looking for knockout blows, you want to constantly be thinking, what would I do if I were black? How would I fight back and make the position messy if I were playing the opponent's side? That's how you find these moves. And then once you think, so a4 is not a super strong move here, but once you think of an idea for the opponent, like pawn to a4, now you start to weigh your options, right? Do I take one move to play a4? Do I go ahead with my attack and do h5 or something else, or bishop d3, queen e4? You can start to weigh those options. In this case, because Fischer has full control, I think the option is pretty easy. Like you just say, okay, I'm going to play a4. Black's really in trouble here. They're not going to be able to consolidate. Black's not even up any material. That's a great question, Eric. Okay, so now there's a little bit of shuffling by Fischer. He moves the rook a couple times. But this is where he starts to make progress. Bishop d3. Look at that, eyeing the h7 square. Queen e8, queen e4 with the threat of rook to f8 check. And that's going to be a mate in 3. Because if black takes back with the knight, let's just give black a bad move. Rook to f8 check. If black takes back with the knight, the other rook goes to f8, and then queen h7 mate. So cool threat by Fischer, and this is something you should do in your own games too. When you have an advantage like this, it's not always easy to just immediately get the knockout blow. Sometimes what you want to do is keep poking and prodding, create more threats, look for new targets, right? So this is a new idea by Fischer. He just shifted these pieces onto this diagonal to create a new threat. Knight f6 played. Now put your answers in the chat. What is the best move for white? This is where we got to think tactics. Just simple saying charge up the battery. That's right. Put in the chat. What's the best move for white? I think the delay with the chat is a little bit longer today than usual. It feels like about a 10-second delay. Rook takes f6, rook takes f6, rook takes knight. You guys are good. Rook takes f6. Dave's saying rook h5. Oh, rook h5 is interesting. Maybe queen takes. Rook f6. So rook f6 is the top move. Brilliant move. Fischer found it. G takes f. Rook takes f6. Black is up 1 point of material, but the position is completely losing for black. The game went king g8, bishop c4, king h8, queen f4. The problem is queen takes h6 is a threat, rook to f8. Fork is a threat. Nothing black can do. So Spassky resigned. So that was a 41 move game. And we started in this position on move 17 with the hanging pawns. And just the way that Fischer said, okay, I'm going to take the hanging pawns, create it into this pawn structure, target your light square pawns after e4, right? Separate the hanging pawns, create that new weakness. He just started pushing ahead, and now he said, okay, we're not even close to that hanging pawn structure anymore. Now it's all about king safety, space, and he just says, I'm going to shut down your play and attack kingside at the same time. Inserts that a4, shifts to this diagonal. Just beautiful. And then, boom, finishes off with a tactic. What a game by Fischer. Rook takes h6 immediately here. Still winning for white. So that would be fine. Yep. All right, let's go to game number 2. Karpov against Kasparov. This is from the World Championship match 1985. At this point, they had 2 wins each, and there were 11 draws. So tied match at this point, and it was a 24-game match total. Queen h5 prior to resigning. Good question, good question. Looks like rook f8 check is a checkmate in 5 moves, with the bishop coming back to d3, and then you got to lose the queen. Queen g4, queen g8. Yeah, so that's when there's a lot of options for black, but the players worked through them all. and Fischer was winning by force. All right, so this game, Karpov has the white pieces. Karpov is a more strategic player. Kasparov is a more tactical player. But in this game, the roles are a little bit reversed. We're going to see some nice tactical play by Karpov, and we're going to look at it from the black side. We get a Sicilian, Taimanov variation. And you can see this pawn structure is getting a little more interesting. So let's stop here. We got an extra pawn for Karpov. Extra pawn sitting here on d5. So what I want you to do in the chat, type what are the imbalances and what's the eval. What are the imbalances here and what's the evaluation? Welcome OP Gaming. Haven't seen your name in the chat before. Yeah, Matt, that's right. We got an isolated D pawn for white. Black has more space. The space, it's a little hard to figure out. I think this white pawn does give white more space, but white has some clumsy pieces, like that knight on a3 is an awkward looking piece. And I think black sort of has space because this pawn can be used as a shield. Black can operate behind the pawn and work around it. Yeah, Jaga's saying more active pieces for black. 0.3 eval. And the eval is 0.44 according to Stockfish. So that's very close. Christian saying 0.00. Pawn will fall. So what black needs to do here is black needs to play actively. You guys are right on with the imbalances. White's got the extra pawn. Black needs to keep the pieces as active as possible. And he finds an important move here. Bishop to f5. If black doesn't play bishop to f5, white is up 1 point. So essentially, white is up that full pawn. No compensation for black. With bishop f5, Kasparov gets some compensation. This bishop targets open light squares. He would love to sink his knight into d3. Bishop g5 played. And what Karpov would like to do is play knight c4, queen d2, knight back to e3, and he wants to control all of this space. And then he has the rooks connected. He can bring him to the center, right? Everything's looking good at that point. Kasparov plays rook to e8. And now knight c4 is the best move. But Karpov plays queen to d2, and that's a slip up by him. This actually gives black a slight advantage, but there's only one move that gives black the advantage. So you guys type it in the chat. What is the move for black here? Only good move. Well, only move to give it an advantage. You guys are too good. I feel like, yeah, I feel like the ChessGoals live chat, when you work together with your answers, at least 2,200. B5, P5, first two guesses right off the bat. H6, H6. So H6 is the second best move, and it's pretty close to equal. Very, very slight edge for white. The answer is pawn to B5. So Tippy and Christian got it correct. What's happening after pawn to B5 is the knight on A3 doesn't have any great squares. Defended, right? It's going to get captured by one of these. Defended, defended. That's a really bad move because knight C2 probably wins the rook in the corner. So this knight, focus on this knight the rest of the way. I gave a hint. This knight is going to be shut out of the game for a long time. Hey, Wayward Chess, welcome. What I really love about this game is the whole board control. It's actually probably one of my favorite things in chess, is who controls the board. So B5 played. rook a d1. And the best move for white might have actually been to play pawn to d6 there, opening up the attack on the rook. So that's something that had to be calculated. But Karpov is playing solid. Rook d1, knight d3. And the reason that Kasparov played knight to d3 is he wants to cut off the queen from the d-pawn. He's weakening that d-pawn, keeping the knight on an active square. And it's really hard to kick that knight out of here. Knight a to b1 was played. Another solid move by Karpov, but pawn to d6 was best. And I'll show you why. On d6, what happens here is the game gets messy. So black has the advantage, but Karpov should try to make the game messy. After d6, queen takes, grab the knight, and then grab the rook in the corner. White can play knight c2, knight takes b2. At this point, Kasparov has the two bishops, but Karpov is still up on material. So that's what he should have gone for, and I think the reason he didn't play this is because he probably felt, I don't want to give Kasparov two bishops in this really open position. So instead he tried to play solid, but this backfired, and Kasparov showed like, hey, I can be a strategic player too. It's not all tactics, but there's going to be a combination of both. h6, putting the question to the bishop. This is always kind of a nice move, just in general in chess, pawn to h6. Because when you put a question to a bishop on g5, if you're okay with them taking, like here, black's just going to play queen takes back. If you're okay with them taking this knight and you're not afraid of a sacrifice, h6 is almost always good because this bishop is trying to play on two diagonals, right? It wants to play on this diagonal and this diagonal. When you put a question into the bishop like this, usually the bishop is going to lose squares. It loses some scope. It loses mobility. And in this case, there aren't a lot of great squares for the bishop. This is defended. This is attacked twice. So he drops back. Now pawn to b4 is played, kicking this knight. And this guy doesn't have a lot of good squares either. It doesn't have any advanced squares except a4, which is what was played in the game. But we're going to see now this knight get trapped. Bishop d6 played. Look at how this knight has no good moves now. Oh, my arrows are bad. All four of these squares either not available or the knight gets captured. Look at this knight. Captured, captured, not available. Look at this rook. Captured, captured. Look at this rook. Captured. All of these white pieces are really having trouble. Look at this bishop. Runs into its own pawn. Yes, that's the extra pawn, but the bishop is not active. Look at the pieces for Kasparov. Really strong knight. Active bishop. Active bishop. This guy's pinned, but he is active, right? He's controlling a lot of central squares. Open file. You can start to see Kasparov just building the mobility and the value of every one of his pieces. And what does Karpov have in return? One pawn. Now, what is the threat here for black? Put the answer in the chat. If it's Kasparov's move again, what does he play here? Eric, that's a great question. How do you capitalize on these kinds of positions? There's not really any tactics. Sometimes you have to play slowly, right? You have to just build the position, create threats, wait for the tactics to come. Like you can create a tactical threat, but you don't want to try too hard. You don't want to ruin your position just to go all out for tactics. Like right here, Kasparov is in the game without doing anything too crazy. Christian, bishop takes h2. Yeah, this is a great tactic. Let me give white a bad move. Pawn to b3. Bishop takes h2. King takes. Knight g4. Takes. Queen takes h4. Fork. Bishop takes h3. And now the critical shot is knight to f4. Threatening queen takes h2 and mate. And there are no good moves here for white. Because what white needs to do is defend this h3 pawn. And look at the poor queen. She gets captured by the rook here. She gets captured by the knight here. She gets captured by the pawn here. There's no way for white to guard h3. Game over. So that's how this tactic works. You have to see that whole line. But that's the threat. So Karpov plays bishop back to g3, rook c8. Again, notice every piece by Kasparov is going on a strong square. b3. And now we see a deep idea by Kasparov. This is a really nice move. He plays pawn to g5. The reason this is so good is white wants to play knight to b2. But after knight to b2, pawn to g4 can be played, and this bishop is trapped. So it's actually slowing white down and trying to get his knight back into the game. Bishop takes d6 played. Queen takes g3. Knight d7, bishop g2. Queen f6, 3, a5. Now, I really like what Kasparov did here. a3 was trying to get rid of this b pawn to free the knight. Kasparov just backs it up, and he knows that after takes, his knight still guards the pawn on b4. So he's playing for this full board control. He's still down a pawn. He's been down a pawn this whole game pretty much. But he's keeping these pieces active. So takes, queen a2. And even if white had a free move here, knight d2 runs into rook e2, pinning it to the queen. And that's a pretty tough position for white. Bishop g6, d6. Now here an idea for white is bishop to h3, trying to get the bishop active on this diagonal. So what should Kasparov play here? Put your answers in the chat. Another prophylactic move. Don't want bishop h3 coming. g4, g4, h5, g4, h5, g4. Yeah, and those moves are equally as good as each other. Wow, you guys are right on. Pawn to g4, played in the game, restricting the bishop. That's probably white's best piece right now, because at least it has this diagonal, but we're restricting it from going to h3. Queen d2, attacking this pawn. King g7 to defend. Another little prophylactic move. Now Karpov plays pawn to f3, trying to open things up. So kind of going back to the question of what Eric said, how do you capitalize on these kinds of positions? It's really hard for white to find a good move here. He plays f3, and there are some good things about this move, right? He wants to trade for this pawn on g4. He wants to open up his rook and be able to get some breathing room for his pieces. But what happens when you play f3 is it opens up this f2 square. That makes this king more vulnerable. And Kasparov knows this, right? So he can shift gears a little bit now. He takes d6, takes, and now we see queen d4 taking advantage of this diagonal. King h1, knight f6. This knight is trying to jump in to f2. Attack the queen. Knight e4, and now we see both knights threatening f2. Queen covering g1. Why not queen d4 directly? Good question. It's a great question, Patrick. Queen d4 directly is just as good as queen takes d6. So you could simply check first. There's kind of like smothered mate ideas here too. Now Karpov plays queen takes d3. It's actually not a bad move. It's number 1 or 2 according to Stockfish. Knight f2 check, rook takes, bishop takes, rook d2. Kasparov plays queen e3, rook takes d3, and now he's finishing off Karpov with tactics, rook to c1, pinning that rook to the last rank. The rook takes e3 runs into rook takes d1. Knight b2. Queen f2, threatening him, or it's a mate in 4, I mean, with best play. Knight d2, takes, rook e1, resigns. Excuse me. So, this was another 40 move game, similar to the last one. And I just love how, from this position, Kasparov said, okay, I'm going to let you have that extra pawn, or I'm even going to let you have this exchange in the corner. I'm going to play for full board control, and I'm going to restrict all of your counterplay. Yeah, I agree, Thomas. Beautiful game. Really nicely played by Kasparov. Next up, We got Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces against Vishy Anand with the black pieces. 2013 World Chess Championship. Game number 5, tied 2-2 with 4 draws. This is a little bit different than the last 2 examples. This is going to be a classic Magnus playing for a 2-result position. This is a tool that you can use in the middle game as well. Try to create positions that even if you know it should be a draw with best play, if you feel you can never lose and your opponent has some things that they'll have to figure out long term, it's a perfectly viable strategy to play the middle game. Like, go into an endgame in a position that's hard for your opponent to play and fairly easy and low risk for you to play. It sounds boring, but there's really an art to it. So I'm going to just jump ahead to this position. Carlsen's move, he's playing white. I want you to mention in the chat, what are the imbalances and what is the eval here? Equal material, white to move. Eric says black has a poopy bishop. Yeah, bishop on c8 runs into these 2 pawns. Just simple queenside pawn majority for white. Got 3 versus 2. Gives a 0.4 eval. Patrick, more space for white. Centralized active pieces. Aaron says white controls the center. Good. Ethan says black minor pieces are somewhat uncoordinated. Yep, I agree. So now, what would you play as white? If you're in Magnus's shoes here, what do you play? Thomas with the queenside castle. Thomas, you're not afraid of knight takes e3? Giving up the bishop pair? Well, that's exactly right. It's queenside castle. And there are multiple moves here that are all around equal. b4 is one of them, so Patrick, that's a good suggestion. Rook d1 is another one. Queenside castle was played by Magnus. Knight takes e3. It's about time. F takes e3. We had a weak pawn, but Carlsen knows he's going to take this into one of those endgames. This is what he's really good at. Bishop c7. He trades on c6. So he gives Vishy this isolated pawn. One of the imbalances I don't know if anyone mentioned was that white's development is faster. I guess it kind of goes along with the more active pieces. White's developed more quickly. That's what Magnus is going to use to his advantage here. He's going to keep Anand on his heels. He trades queens. Bishop e2. And in this normal-ish looking position, if Magnus just had one free move to go bishop f3, Anand's actually in big trouble. So this is a pretty quiet looking position, but Anand has to be very careful here. For example, if you castle bishop f3, it's already almost a 1-point advantage for Magnus. He goes king e7, bishop f3, targeting the pawn. Bishop d7. Patrick, it's a great question. That's how I felt too. Magnus doesn't mind that Vishy has the bishop pair because he knows that he can keep Vishy on his heels, and this knight is a really strong piece. So look at one of the bishops, the poopy bishop mentioned earlier. He's having trouble getting in the game. So this bishop pair is not as strong as it could be. Yeah, I don't think you could have saved the bishop pair in that position where you queenside castled. Knight e4. This knight targets these dark squares. Bishop b6. Question for the chat. What do you play here as white? What did Magnus play? There are multiple moves that are all very close to equal still. This one might give you like a 0.19 according to the engine. Chris is saying c5. Thomas says c5. Sharon says e5, which I think means c5. c5, c5. Great guesses. C5, top move. Now look at that bishop. So again, we're seeing these strong players try to restrict your opponent's pieces. Magnus is shutting down that bishop on d7. Anand plays the top move, pawn to f5. He has to fight back. This sequence by Carlsen I like a lot. He takes b6, f takes e. He plays b7. Subtle move, right? It was natural to take this pawn, but this is critical. Plays b7 because it keeps these pawns separated. So in the end, Vichy's going to have isolated a pawn, isolated c pawn, isolated doubled e pawns, right? All of these pawns are separated with one file in between each. Rook b8 takes. Oops, I went too far. Rook hf1. So the eval here is actually back to 0.00. But look at the position. You have to think of this human versus human. And one thing that I like to do in these kind of positions, to be a little bit more objective about it in terms of how it's going to play out in practice, is I like to flip the board and think, if I'm playing the black pieces here, how does this position feel? Because there is no way for white to win by force. And sometimes it's easy to get caught up thinking like, oh, I thought I should play for an advantage here. I thought I was winning. Didn't work out. It's 0.00. Flip the board. If you're playing black here, this is not a fun position. This 0.00 is, yeah, Stockfish can hold it with best play, but black is stuck playing defense. This is not what you want. So now Magnus has this 2 resolved endgame. Anand is defending. And this one, even though we're already in the endgame, it's not quite middle game anymore. Let's just play through this and appreciate what happens, and then we'll talk about it at the end. Threatening rook f7 check. Now, this is a critical transition. The g-pawn is going to drop. Now Magnus is up 1 pawn. It's still 0.00 with best play. Magnus is still up a pawn. Bishops are gone. Eval's 0.5, so still a draw with best play. And there's the blunder by Anand. Move 51. Now it just jumped up to +4, and if you let the engine run deep enough, white is going to be winning here. Anand resigns. This was just an example of how to take a really drawish, and you could even claim boring middle game position. Starting around here with the queen trade. This is still middle game technically. When you have more than 7 minor pieces, it's the middle game. Less than 7 is the end game. I think 7 is also 7 or less, I think, is end game. Major or minor pieces. So right now we have 4 each. So still technically a middle game. But that was a great example by Magnus of how to create a 2-result scenario. Play with active pieces, restrict your opponent, and Anand did a great job, right? He got his pieces active as possible. Notice how his rooks are more active. He gets his bishop at an active square. But what Carlsen's already thinking here is, I'm going to win your g-pawn. I'm going to convert the active versus passive pieces to a material advantage. And even though that material advantage wasn't quite enough to be winning, right? This is not winning for white. It's a draw with best play, 0-0-0. This is shifting the imbalances, right? And now he's got something new to play with. And eventually Vichy cracks. Eventually he made a blunder. Um, Here it's already around half a pawn, so the engine kind of appreciates at low depth that it's more difficult to play for black because it's not finding a win for either side, but it's still saying, hey, white's up material. But then right here, this was the critical blow, or the critical blunder. King e6, rook e2 was actually the only move to stay in the game. But this is a hard position too because the king's coming up, the a pawn is still pushing, king c6, rook h6. Now, it's not easy to hold this as black. There's still a lot of play left with the two pawns and white having the extra pawn. So another type of game, different type of middle game, but that's something you guys should use in your own games as well. Look to convert the end games with those two result positions. What do you guys prefer? The games, which game was your favorite so far? Fischer Spassky game 1, Karpov Kasparov game 2, or Carlsen and Anand game 3? You know, I think games 1 and 2 are really beautiful in like the classical sense, the attacking games. But I'm really starting to appreciate more and more that game 3 style. Like, I'm trying to do that in my own games. Push for those end game advantages, the two result scenarios. It's not easy to do, but with practice, you can try to play like Magnus. Yeah, the Kasparov crush was really good. Thomas's game 1 was clear. I think older games tend to be clearer too than the newer games. Because modern GMs just they don't go down as easily as the older GMs. Like, they're much better at playing dynamic when they're worse. Now we have Botvinnik with the white pieces, Capablanca with the black pieces. And in this game, we're going to play from Botvinnik's side. And what we're going to see here is how to convert a lead in development into some imbalance advantages and then push that to get the win. So we're going to jump ahead to this position. White to move. I want you guys to tell me the eval. So you haven't been mentioning the eval very often in the chat. Put the eval first and then mention the imbalances. I feel like no one wants to get the eval wrong. Yeah, game 3 was very technical. Sharon's saying -1. Matt's saying -0.5, plus 0.5, 0.2, 0.8, -0.3. Okay, someone in the chat should average all these values. We'll see if the law of averages works here. Maybe I'll do it. Okay, got the calculator out. -1, -0.5, plus 0.5, plus 0.2, plus 0.8, -0.3, plus 0.3. Oh, we're at 0. We're actually at 0 right now. Dennis says 0. 0. Okay, so you guys have averaged 0 so far. Is there a YouTube tool? No, I just have my computer calculator open. The eval is 0.4. So Botvinnik does have the advantage with the white pieces. He finds the top move. Bishop takes a6. Now, to me, this is a hard move to see because general chess rules would say bishop pair advantage can be worth up to half a pawn. So shouldn't Botvinnik just retreat the bishop? Keep that on. He decides to take. And he leaves himself with the quote-unquote bad bishop. That bishop is the same color as all of these pawns. That should be a bad bishop that's trapped in. But look at this knight. The knight on a6 is a bad square for the knight because it can't go to b4, can't go to c5. It really doesn't want to go to c7. That's kind of a weird square. It wants to be here. And that's 2 moves away. Also, with this pawn structure, Put in the chat, what is the weakest pawn on the board? Which pawn is the weakest here? Thomas says d5. I agree. c3 is probably second weakest, but d5 is the weakest pawn. So this is a potential long-term weakness for black. Bishop b2, queen d7, a4, rook e8, queen d3. And now this is a move that you'll see a lot at the club level too, and it's actually a good move. But with this pawn tension, right, these pawns attack each other. With this pawn tension, a lot of players are extremely quick to relieve the pawn tension, meaning they either push or they take. They don't want those pawns attacking each other for too long because it makes chess complicated. We all want it to become easy. We want chess to be simple. The strongest move here is c4, but it's a very committal move. Now, I want you guys to tell me in the chat, what should the plan be now for Botvinnik? Once you see c4, what are you thinking in terms of plans? Christian says e4. Thomas says f3, e4. Hey, Bresta J is in the chat. Attack the d5 pawn, e4, e4. So e4 is a good answer. Oh, we got the... Guys, I didn't realize. We have the dog cam. We got the dog cam today. Oh, there he is. The barker. So e4 is correct, but you want to play f3 first. Thomas had it spot on. You want to play f3, e4, because when black captures, you want to capture back with a pawn. Right? You want to be able to take back with a pawn and build that massive center. You also want the open f file. Okay, so after c4, queen c2. First, you got to move the queen. Knight b8. Rook ae1. Yeah, Sharon's right. You lose the queen if you keep her on d3. So this is what Botvinnik's going for now. This plan, f3, e4, with the rooks behind the pawns. Knight c6. Knight g3. Getting that knight out of the way. Knight a5. Now, you guys can't see the eval bar here. But in this position, after knight a5, eval bar goes up like 1.5 points for white. What Capablanca is trying to do is he wants to play knight b3, boxing this queen out from the defensive a4. And after knight b3, he's going to simply pick up this pawn. And there's no rook a1 because on b3, the knight guards the a1 square, right? So just picture that. Knight b3, queen takes pawn. Pretty simple plan. And we talked about this at the local club when we looked at this game. That sort of play works really well for Capablanca on average. He wins a lot of games by just going up a pawn and converting the endgame. In this case, the best move is actually knight to e4. It's trying to slow down Botvinnik's plan. So now f3 is played. Knight b3. Botvinnik plays pawn to e4. So two great moves in a row. f3, e4. Sacrifices the pawn on a4, though. Was it worth it? I already spoiled it a little bit. Yes, it's worth it to sack that pawn. Queen takes. And now, pawn to e5 is played. So we got new pawn tension here. And we really wanted black to take. But pawn to e5 is the strongest move because it dislodges this knight. And now what we're going to do is attack the king. So even though that king has 3 pawns in front of it, whenever you see a white pawn on e5 that's protected, dislodging a knight off of f6, that's an attacking pawn formation. These pawns point up towards the black king, right? That pawn chain points that way. That lets you know that you should be able to attack kingside. Behind the pawns, your space can point your forces that direction. This is still a really ugly bishop. It looks like a pawn as part of the pawn chain. But look at how white has both rooks and knight over here. queen pointing this direction, f-pawn ready to push up the board. White is ready to attack. And someone mentioned in the chat, yeah, Thomas mentioned in the chat, this queen is now far away from the king, and so is this knight. So again, we're going to see this dynamic of pieces getting a little bit off sides, and then the other side attacking the opponent's king. Knight d7, queen f2, shuffles over, g6, pawn to f4, threatening pawn to f5. Now here, Capablanca makes another middle move. He plays pawn to f5, locking up these pawns. And the question for the chat, do you capture en passant? Or do you play something else? So just say yes or no. Do you capture en passant, yes or no? Wow, pretty split decision. Yes? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 yeses. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 no's. Wow. The nice thing about this question is white has an advantage both ways. Okay, who's going to be the tiebreaker? It's 5-5, yes or no? Who's going to be the tiebreaker? Thomas says, I don't want that d7 knight coming in the game. Patrick is saying we got to open up the bishop. Just Simple says alpha 0 time h4. Okay, we got a tiebreaker. Kandu says no. The best move is e takes f6. So because this decision is split, let's go a little bit deeper. I wasn't planning on going too deep on this move, but let's go a little bit deeper. Knowing that the strongest move is e takes f6, I want you guys to tell me why in the chat. Why would we want e takes f6 here? Because I can tell you my first instinct would be no. Because I want this protected pass pawn. I want that knight shut out of the game. But tell me, why do we actually want to take? Thomas is saying we have f5 next. Open the king. Naren is saying queen f3 and pawn h4 plan. Prestige, open f-file. Patrick, closed position can favor the knights. Sharon, attach the head of the pawn chain. Open rook. Naren is saying f5 push. Yeah, you guys are all spot on. This is exactly right. You want this combination of e takes f6, which is played in the game, and pawn to f5. And if you don't see pawn to f5, taking on f6 was a bad move. So e takes f en passant was only good if you spotted this f5 move next and played the f5 move. And the reason this is good for white is because these imbalances are all about king safety right now. We want to keep the king safety attack. I guess king safety imbalance is the most prominent advantage in the position, right? We want to just focus on, let's get all these forces that are already sitting on the king side, and let's get them to attack the black king while these pieces are offsides and probably that rook as well. So rook takes e1 played, rook takes, rook e8. Capablanca is going for trades, right? He knows his king is in some danger. He wants trades. This is a really strong move by Botvinnik. He goes rook to e6, trying to get black to take so that he can take back with the pawn, opening up his queen. And taking is the strongest move because otherwise Botvinnik controls the file. So takes, king g7. Now this move is really nice. Queen f4. The threat is knight to f5 check. So let's just give black a random move. Knight f5 check, pawn takes, queen g5 check and hitting the knight. No matter where the king goes, capture with check. This is a forced mate in 13 moves. So white is completely winning. So queen f4, threatening knight f5 check, and this queen is also eyeing this square and this square, right? She's on a great dark square diagonal. Queen e8 played. Queen e5, tying down that knight. This knight is still offsides. That bishop is out of the game. Queen e7. Put your move in the chat. What does white play here? And while you're thinking, hit the thumbs up button if you haven't yet. We have 30 viewers, 17 likes. So what does white play here? Bishop sack to a3. Okay. Thomas says, I know it. Oh, you've seen this game. Yeah, famous. Okay, good, good. Bishop a3. Bishop a3. That's right. Bishop a3. We're trying to deflect that queen. It's a brilliant move. Queen takes a3 played, which is the top response. Black is busted here. Now put your move in the chat. What is the best move for white now after this? Queen takes a3. So we've seen two styles of games so far. We've seen playing strategically, leading to tactics. That's games 1, 2, and now this game, game 4. And we've also seen playing strategically, leading to endgame advantages, or endgame practical advantages, I should say, in the Carlsen game. But I think in most of your games, it's going to be more like this, where it's play strategic, you get tactics. No one has said the answer yet. It's not queen c7 check. Queen c7 check, the king goes out to h6, and it's a draw with best play. There's only one winning move here. Queen c7 is the only draw, and everything else is losing for white. So you have to find the best move. I do see a couple people mentioned it. Chess Simple was the first to get it. Knight to h5. What a shot. And the best move is g takes h, played in the game. Now we get this fork, queen g5. And what Botvinnik had to calculate here is that he has to be okay with this queen coming to c1 and black getting a whole bunch of checks. He had to figure out that he could get his king safe in the end. We have king f8, takes f6, king g8, pawn to e7. He lets Capablanca get the checks. This is so hard to do, but this position is only winning if you play e7. You can throw in a couple queen checks, repeat, whatever, but you have to play e7 to get the win, and you have to calculate back probably at least 5 moves that this line is winning for you. e7, we get check, king up, check, king up, check, king up, all the way to h4, check, king up. Botvinnik is white, Capablanca is black. Sorry, I might have flipped it. Queen e2, check. King comes back, and now we see g4, king h5, no more checks. It's a mate in 6 with best play, and Capablanca resigns. And Chess Simple makes a good point. When you're trying to calculate these lines, it is nice if you have a forced repetition as a backup, right? Sometimes you might think, oh, I might miss a move, but if you miss a move and it's a draw, maybe it's not the end of the world. That's always helpful when you calculate. So what a game by Botvinnik. This was one where, there were a lot of difficult to understand strategic decisions. going all the way back to here, giving up the bishop pair, keeping only the bad bishop. And then this bishop just, I mean, this looks like a pawn. If I didn't tell you what piece was sitting here and you just saw the white pieces, I think you would guess that it would be a pawn on b2. Probably 95% of people would say, oh, it should be a pawn there. But it's a bishop. And then even though this c4 was the strongest move, this opened up the whole idea for the kingside attack. So if black wanted to keep the advantage, the best move here was pawn to h5. And if f3, rook takes e3 can be played. Let's just try that same thing. Here, h4 is the top move. Wow, look at that. So Stockfish knows. Let's not allow knight coming out to g3. And if knight f4, it wants b5. Okay, so yeah, look what the computer's doing. It's saying, I'm going to try to slow down your plan, and I'm going to use my extra queenside pawn. So that's probably how Capablanca should have played this position. After takes, f3, it likes knight c7. And after e4, it wants to take and play real active on the queen side. So it actually gives white the big center, but plays super actively. And that's pretty high-level chess. Like, this looks optically kind of bad for black. I don't know how many games, Thomas, these two have played. That's a really good question. I'm not sure how many games they've played. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our promotion. So on all of these live streams, someone called it like the 1% Club, which I kind of like because it's about 1% of ChessGoals members come to our live streams. At the end of each live stream, I always do a promotion for the ChessGoals courses. So that's what I'm going to show you guys next. What we're doing for the next 3 days, 50% off everything. And I will email, if you signed up in the description for live courses with that Google form, you'll get an email about this. What you do is you can use the coupon code GOALS, GOALS. And this is good for everything. It's good for any individual course, good for any bundle, and it's also good for what we have here, the Lifetime Access Bundle. This is our most popular bundle. I see a lot of Lifetime Access members currently in our chat today. A lot of them purchase it after a live stream. But this gets you all 13 of our current courses, which has a retail price of $822, plus all future courses for free. So you're kind of getting in early. This list price of $497 goes up every single time we have a new course. And with the 50% off, it knocks it down to a little under $225. It's like $223.50, I want to say. But about $225 gets you all 13 current courses, all future courses included. There's a link down in the description if you want to check it out. And just a little bit about our courses, some commonly asked questions. All of our courses come with a PGN download, and there's instructions on how to upload it to Chessable, ChessBase, Chess.com, and Lichess. You get a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you buy a course or a bundle, just email me if you don't like it. I'm really quick at responding to customers. I'll just refund your money, no questions asked. Customer support, that's primarily myself. So either in our Discord server, within the course, you can ask questions, and there's like discussion boxes for every video. We also have a message board in the course player, and we have our Discord server. And whatever you purchase, you get lifetime access to. So if you just purchase, let's say, our Carol Khan opening course at the half off, that'd make it $34.50. Any updates down the road that we make to that Carol Khan course, you get those updates as well. So it is a lifetime course. You get access to the private community on our course player website. And our Discord community is now semi-private. So we don't make the link completely public. It's mostly course owners, but we have started to open it up just a little bit to some people on the email list. Chess Simple says lifetime access is the best deal for chess content. Thank you, Chess Simple. Christian says absolutely recommendable. I love it. Yep, you guys are both lifetime access members. Sharon, multiple single courses, yeah, half off of everything. So you can do multiple courses. And if you already have a course or multiple courses and you want to upgrade, send me an email and we can work out a price. You don't have to pay the full price if you already have some courses, let's say, and you want to do lifetime access. And then here's our average reviews, 4.91, 91 reviews. And we do have over 100 lifetime members now. That's kind of our main seller. It's our best seller. And then the other thing I want to mention is we now have this ChessGoals trainer that we talked about in the beginning. Thanks, Ethan. Ethan says lifetime is an awesome deal. I appreciate that. This is the brand new ChessGoals trainer. It's train.chessgoals.com. And what you do is you create a login here. And you'll get to this screen. There's currently 9 modules. Mate in 1, Mate in 2, Mate in 3, and so on. And this is programmed by Jesse. He's the co-owner of ChessGoals. And it's in the very early stages. So you can use the trainer for free. But we also have a way that you can subscribe to the trainer. You click to unlock additional problems. That's how you can subscribe. And currently, if you do the yearly plan and start a trial, your first week is free. And we have a promotion code Discord that can save you half off. So that knocks it down to $29.99. So if you want to try out our trainer, feel free to try it for free. If you want to subscribe, you can. Just a couple things about the trainer that currently set it apart. When you do, for example, the Mate in 2 puzzles, you see how there's 3 boxes up here? It's going to test me on 3 different solutions. So it's going to, instead of just saying, here's one response for the opponent, it gives multiple responses to try out. And the nice thing about that is it really forces you to think deeper as if it's a real game scenario. Like the chess.com puzzles, for example, the way they're programmed, there's always only one correct solution, and then they only give you one response for the opponent. And the only responses that they ever choose are ones that have only one good move in return. Whereas these have multiple acceptable answers for us and multiple responses for the opponent. And Jesse went through all of these puzzles by hand, so he's only keeping the good ones. When there's a couple like obvious responses for us, he only makes you do one of them. So it's kind of all hand-picked, hand-curated problems. We're really early on in the process of building this trainer, but it's super exciting, and we got some fun things coming down the pipeline. So if you want to get in early on the trainer, train.chessgoals.com. You can do a bunch of puzzles for free, and if you want to, you can unlock additional puzzles here. So any questions on the courses, the lifetime access, or the trainer? Let me know in the chat if you have any questions on any of that. Oh, wow. Ethan gave some stats in the chat. Okay, chessgames.com says 8 lifetime Botvinnik Capablanca games, 2-1 in favor of Botvinnik, 5 draws. That makes sense. Yeah. Because Botvinnik, I believe, was in his prime. Oh, I'm going to get the dates wrong. I feel like Capablanca was in his prime in the late 30s, and Botvinnik was in his prime in the late 40s, early 50s. Does that sound right? Yeah, Chess Simple is saying, great idea. Him and his friend were trying a Chessable endgame course. I have the 100 endgame course on Chessable, Chess Simple. I agree with you. I found the 100 endgame course super frustrating because there would be like 6 bishop moves along a diagonal. All of them were correct. And it didn't let me do the wrong ones. Or not the wrong ones, like the non-answer move. It only wanted one answer. And then I remember there was a video with Magnus and John doing that same book. And you could tell like Magnus was getting a little frustrated, I think, where it was like, okay, you didn't do the right bishop square. So one of the things that we're working on currently is guess the eval tool for the trainer. I'm super excited about that, and it's going to incorporate the imbalanced scorecard. I don't know if you guys remember that video we did, the imbalanced scorecard, where there was kind of like all these different imbalances that go into creating an eval. We're going to do something like that within the trainer. All right, I think we should go through another game. Do you guys want to see one more game? We've gone through 4. We could pull up a 5th one. Encore. Okay. Yes, please. Okay. Okay, I have time for one more game. There are 2 options, though. You guys want to see Polgar versus Anand, which is just like a tactical masterpiece, I would say. Or Topalov against Kramnik, which is more of like a positional struggle that later on leads to some tactics. Do you want to see Polgar winning, or do you want to see Kramnik winning? Polgar, tactics. Kramnik. Okay, there's 2 Kramniks and 2 Polgars. We're doing the statistics style. It's going to be a poll. Which game? Answer 1, Polgar. Answer 2, Kramnik. Keep in mind, the Kramnik-Topalov game was part of the whole cheating in the bathroom with the Fritz engine game, or that match. Remember Topalov accused Kramnik of going to the bathroom too many times in the World Championship match? But the Polgar game is super impressive because, I mean, she just unleashed a massive attack on Anand. Oh, this one's close. 10 votes, 60-40 Polgar right now. My, how the turntables. Josh. $58-42 Polgar, 12 votes. All right, let's do Polgar. It's still 58-42. Get it queued up. In the poll. There we go. Okay. Move 11. Queen f3 just played. This comes out of a Sicilian. Yeah, Patrick, I do find that kind of interesting. Kramnik is now accusing some others of cheating. Queen f3 played. I want you guys to put in the chat, what are the imbalances and what are the plans? Put those answers in the chat. Did anyone sign up for the trainer yet? With a free account? Free or paid account? I told Jesse I'm going to talk about the trainer in the live stream. So far, we've only advertised it to Discord. That hasn't been mentioned in our email list yet. All of Black's pieces are sitting on the back rank pretty much. Yep. Only the knight's out. Lead in development for White. Josh. Black is ready to set up for the next game. Exactly right. Black's up material. Yep, that's a big one, Thomas. So Black is up 2 points of material. White's got the development lead in the space. So Polgar from the white side needs to look to attack or get some material back. One of the two. Oh, Larry, that's awesome. You've done a few puzzles already in the trainer. So d4 played by Anand. Queenside castle by Polgar. G takes f6 is a threat. This rook is currently pinning the pawn down. Now there's only one move that holds equality. Vishy finds it. It's knight b to d7. And here, Polgar just straight sacrifices a piece. Bishop d2. So this is attacked. This is attacked. They're both worth 3 points. Vishy's up 2. Polgar is saying, I'm sacking. And the amazing thing here is the engine likes black too. So it shows a lot of confidence in her attacking abilities. She's also lower rated by about 100 points when this game was played. She simply goes bishop back. D takes C. Bishop takes. Now, if knight g8 is played, let's say Vishy tries to hold the material, he would technically be up 2 knights or 2 pawns. But look at this. Every piece is on the 8th rank with 1 knight on the 7th rank that's pinned down to the queen. What a terrible position. So instead, Vishy says, I'm going to give 1 knight back and go bishop g7. Polgar does not take. She goes rook g1. And the idea is she's kind of encouraging Vishy, go ahead and castle, and then I'll take. He castles. She takes. Queen takes. So now, again, we got to evaluate this position. You look at the material. Vishy is still up 1 knight for a pawn. So Vishy's up 2 on material. Polgar needs to attack here. She plays queen to e3. And the threat is rook takes knight, bishop takes back, and then bishop takes e5, lining up queen and bishop with the g7 bishop pinned. So this is a huge threat, this rook takes d7 idea. King h8. Now, since we've gone through these attacking games so far, I think you guys are going to get this. What is the best move for white? Put your answers in the chat. Best move for white. Reality check. Welcome to the chat. Reality check says neutralize his strongest piece, exploit his weakest piece, pick your tactics carefully, or you will fall for positional plans. Yeah, it's good advice. Rittner Consultoria. Welcome, welcome. Okay, we got h4. Rook d6. Keep the answers coming. You can guess more than one if you want. I'll let you know when we get the correct solution. Smithy Q. Bishop h6 is a big threat. Lined up. Thomas is saying f4. Josh says king b1. Rook takes bishop. Just simple. Good. Okay. So the second best move, which is equal position according to Stockfish, king b1. The best move is an advantage for white. Thomas got it. Pawn to f4. You're highlighting this diagonal. So if e takes f4, you can take. And if black takes the queen, there's now bishop takes g7. And this bishop can drop back for a mate. Pretty cool. Okay, so queen b6 was played in the game. f4, queen b6, queen g3, threatening a mate in 1. Queen h6. Now, this is going to be some rapid fire questions. As soon as I see the first answer, we'll move on. Best move for white. Put it in the chat. There's only one move that gives white an advantage. Second best is equal. Rapid fire. No pressure. It's not bishop takes e5. Thomas got it. Rook to d6. Attacking the queen, which defends the bishop. Deflection. f6 played. Now what's the best move? f6 played by black. Best move here is +2. Second best is 0.0. Who's going to get it first? Rittner is correct. Bishop d2. Lining up bishop and queen, threatening f takes e5. e4 played by Anand, just trying to shut down that bishop. Bishop c4, and again, we see this idea that we saw in an earlier game, using the bishop to trap that king in the corner. On to b5. It's also worth noting, if Judith didn't put her bishop here on this move, b5 was coming, and then the bishop would probably not be able to get onto this diagonal pointing at g8. Right, if b5 was played in this position, the bishop doesn't get to c4. So bishop c4, b5, and she keeps it on that strong diagonal with bishop e6. Also creates a double attack. Oops, I moved twice. Rook a7 played to defend. Rook c6. And now there's ideas of rook takes here potentially coming up. Bishop e3, poking at the rook. Bishop d5. So here we see rook takes c8 threatened, followed by bishop takes rook. Drops back, rook c7. And here we see another one of these grandmaster moves by Judith. You don't have to go b3 here. But she sees that the counterplay is coming on the queen side, so she takes one move to slow it down. On to b3. I like this move a lot. Rook b5, bishop c6, double attack. Rook takes f5. So now Anand is up 3 points in material. This knight could be captured. You could go here. The move played in the game was cool. Rook takes c8, brilliancy. Rook takes back, and then the bishop takes with a fork. And what's kind of crazy here is in the end, when the dust settles, material is dead even. But I want you guys to put in the chat now, what do you think the eval is here? White to move. Equal material. It kind of looks like black has this defended. This bishop is, kind of a defensive piece at the moment. What do we think the eval is? Thomas plus 10, Josh plus 8, Rittner plus 5, Christian plus 1.8, Resta J plus 3. I don't have my calculator. Sharon plus 6. So at depth 22, eval is plus 5.2. And I think it's one of those positions where if you let Stockfish just keep going deeper, essentially the 5.2 is going to increase until it finds some sort of checkmate, or I'll say like plus 60 or something crazy. So essentially white is winning once you let the engine go deep enough. Now, how does white finish this off? The first move is rook to d1. And her idea is she wants to infiltrate on d8 with the rook. And what's going to happen here is the rook on f5 is going to cause all the problems for Vishy. That rook is actually out of play. He looks active, hitting this pawn on the 5th rank, but that rook is not able to help defend the weak king, which is the big problem for black in this position. So rook d1, king g8, queen g2, Vishy resigns right here. Queen g2, he resigns. Now, I went deeper on this position just to figure out what exactly is happening here, because to me it's not obvious. But let's say after queen g2, queen g6 is played. Natural move, go for queen trade. There's now queen takes e4. So one pawn up for Judith. Black is still pretty tied down. Let's say bishop f8, trying to shore up the king position. Queen e6 check. And what you notice here is this is sort of a fork of rook and king, right? So black can't play queen f7 because it drops the rook. Now the rook sinks in. So this queen is tied down. She can't help defend. If king h6, now there's rook to d5. And the problem is this rook is double attacked, defended once, cannot be defended twice. And if it takes, pawn to f5 opens up the check from the bishop and wins the queen. And that's game over. So king h6 doesn't work. Okay, so what if king h8? Move the king to the corner. Maybe white's running out of attackers, right? Rook to d8, creating this threat. King g7, defending. Queen d7, checking the king, but also keeping the attack on the rook. So this queen, again, cannot come back to f7. King g8, queen c8. Double attack on the bishop, still holding the attack on the rook. Black's busted. There's no good checks for black. This bishop is falling with check, and mate's going to follow soon. So these players somehow saw all this. After queen g2, Anand resigned. Yeah, that was just, not only was that end position brutal, I feel like the whole attack was brutal. Just the way Judith used her pieces, she didn't care about the material, kept everything active, kept creating threats. Yeah, Polgar rules. And Vichy was just the whole time playing defense. I mean, let's just mouse through this again and appreciate it. f4, opening the diagonal. Queen g3, creating the mate threat. Deflection. Another threat. Improves the only piece that wasn't attacking. Gets this bishop active, right? All 5 pieces are active. Now she starts to convert with tactics, right? I mean, this is a nice conversion. She went from, okay, I'm looking at all these pieces at your king to, let's go down to equal material in an endgame that potentially could be drawish if you don't calculate deep enough. Right? First glance, it's not clear that this is completely crushing for Polgar. She had to see this back at least 5 moves. What a game. I really like this game a lot. I'll probably have to do some Polgar games on the YouTube channel now. This was just an amazing attack. And this game was played in 1999, the Dos Hermanas tournament in Spain. And it's kind of like a battle of playing styles too. Polgar is known for being a tactical player. Anand is a pretty solid player overall. He's very good at tactics and he's good at rapid chess too, but Polgar is definitely known for her tactical play. All right, so that's the end of today's class on middle game planning. If you signed up with the Google form, which is in the description, you'll get an email with the link to the stream. You can watch it later if you want, jump around. Oh yeah, Matt's saying, can you drop game information in the comments? Yes, I can do that, Matt. Thanks for a great class. Yeah, I'll put the link to the games in the email that I send out. Happy holidays, everyone. Keep in mind, coupon code GOALS, GOALS. If you're interested in any courses, we are going to have a holiday sale coming up, but the holiday sale is going to be 40% off. So it's not going to be as good as the live stream sale, 50%. Any other general chess questions before we wrap up? This was a great turnout. Thanks everybody for coming. And we'll do another YouTube poll to see what you guys want to see next. I really like having the poll results to help dictate. And if you have ideas for future live classes, send them to me. Because I don't know what to put in the poll. Usually it's like calculation and middle game planning are dominating the poll results. Caro-Kann games was 3rd in this last poll, which would be kind of fun, but it's very specific opening. And only like half of ChessGoals members play the Caro-Kann probably. Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone. All right, I don't see any questions. So I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks again. Have a good rest of your day, guys. We'll see you in the next one.